So one of the things that happens is there's a lot of, in 2024, a lot of changes happened for email security. Okay. And I mean a lot. There's a lot of changes that happened like January, February of this year for email security, and they tied to things like DMARC. Okay. So a text record is there to put in some arbitrary human readable text, but it is also there to influence things like SPF records, which say who can send on behalf of your domain. For instance, you might have marketing services that send from your domain on behalf of your domain. You have to give them permission via SPF records. There's a public-private key system for email that is part of DKIM. So you're going to be putting in keys inside of these records. And then finally DMARC that says, hey, if you get an email from my domain and it doesn't look right, I want you to quarantine it. Okay. That's usually only for email administrators. Okay. But let's say you had to prove that you are an email or you're the DNS server admin. Okay. So this is pretty common. Let's say I need to prove to Microsoft that I'm the admin for a domain. I might be asked by Microsoft via their solutions. Okay, Microsoft 365 would do this. Oh, you want us to be your email service? Prove that you own stormwind.com. Prove it by putting in this text record and I'll validate it. So they behind the scenes very, very quickly will validate the text record. Okay. And then you start to accumulate these text records if you don't clean them up. Okay. Now, there is a file that can circumvent really important stuff. There's a file that can circumvent a host's ability to do name resolution. This is called the host file. And it is super weird to worry about this, okay? But let's say you want to play a joke on a friend, okay? Let's say you want to play a joke on a friend and you want to change what websites they go to. And I'm not suggesting you do this, okay? Because, like, you do this in the wrong context and you can actually get fired, okay? But the Windows boxes have this host file that say, oh, if you're trying to go to this website, go to this IP address instead. So it bypasses DNS. This is a file you need to know about. And so theoretically speaking, if you had a client that was behaving differently, its own, let's say all your clients are pointing to the same DNS server, but one of your clients is not doing resolution the same way. Host file. Because you can override it. Because the Windows logic says, is there a host file entry for it? Nope. Then do DNS. Which is a weird fact that I had to learn in the 90s for my MCSE. Okay. DNS is absolutely attackable. In fact, a significant attack happened and was at least publicized last week. Thankfully, it's hard to attack DNS. And we're going to talk about the why of that. But I want you to understand the effect. Okay, so if someone wants to spoof a DNS server or poison the entries inside of your DNS server. Okay, so I first need you to recognize the attack names. DNS spoofing, pretending to be a DNS server. DNS poisoning, you're poisoning the DNS cache. And servers have a cache also. So imagine you were able to rewrite the cache via DNS poisoning on your internal servers. Or maybe you were able to do this for the ISP DNS servers. Most ISPs have their own DNS servers. In fact, all of them do, okay? So at least all the major ones. So you're like, you know what? I want to attack the service providers' DNS servers because it looks like they're not locking them down really well. Hackers can do that. Okay. So if I'm gonna attack an entry, one of the ones that I would attack would be portal.office.com because hey, it's Microsoft 365, and that would give me access to email and files and OneDrive, and that's a lot of stuff. So what would happen is the effect downstream is client does a resolution, they get the wrong answer, and they're pointed to the rogue device, the rogue DNS server that is stood up. Okay, so they could mimic Office 365 at least enough to plug in maybe username and password credentials, and away we go. Here's the deal. This doesn't work most of the time. It doesn't work most of the time because we are validating websites with digital certificates, which works. Okay? Digital certificates are what we get when we go to HTTPS. Did you ever really wonder why we forced everybody to go to HTTPS instead of HTTP? You never want people to go to HTTP-based websites, meaning port 80. And, people would tell you, oh, encryption and all that stuff. Yeah, that's good. But what it does is if your people are going to port 80, they're not getting all the inherent security of TLS, which includes digital certificates, and your web server or your web browser is going to yell at you. If you go to a fake office.com, their certificate is not going to check out. If certificates get breached, there's a system for that. There's a revocation setup. So, that's why we use HTTPS. That's the big reason. A few things that are kind of just good to know, okay? These don't seem to be tested on at all, but HTTPS is good because it validates the responses that we got from DNS, checkout, because they've got TLS. TLS has certificates, but there's some cool stuff that, I was not hip on this until super recently this year, okay? So I'll tell you, like most of this stuff I've known for a really long time, but this is new to me. And I talked to some other people who are like, yeah, it's just because I have focus on different things, but it was new to them too. DNS, one of the things about it is sent. All your DNS communication is sent in clear text, basically. So when somebody goes to a website, they're doing a query for an A record. Anybody can see that. Anybody can see that. I want you to think about that. What are the websites that you go to? Let's say you go to ashleymadison.com, which is that dating website that you can use to cheat on your significant other, okay? I think it still exists. There's a Netflix special that just came out about it. Everybody can see your DNS request when you're going there, okay? Think about that. That's crazy. Oh. So, how do we hide our DNS? Well, you can tuck it inside of HTTPS or TLS. They work on different ports. The more you read about them, the more you realize they're basically the same. There's just super subtle differences that don't matter at this level. Okay. So, here's the deal. There are ways of securing every technology, right? At least nowadays, we try to secure everything we can. You can embed your DNS requests over HTTPS, or you can use DNS over TLS. Okay, they do the same thing because ultimately the security functionality is both with TLS. You might think I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to do this inside of your company. The problem is it can defeat your firewall's content filtering. Okay. Because it does work. And so, it's kind of cool to know about. But the stuff does work. You can hide your DNS inside of either DNS over HTTPS or DNS over TLS. This is super cool stuff. Not tested on it. There's also something called DNSSEC. This is not what we're like under no there's no scenario where I think any of us are going to be doing a lot with DNSSEC. But what it is it's a certificate relationship between the big parts of DNS. Okay. So one of the places that manages my DNS is GoDaddy.com. Okay. So I use GoDaddy.com and some of the domains that I manage. There's actually a certificate relationship between GoDaddy and the top level domain servers. And so this is a way of making sure that let's say you could compromise the .com servers. Hackers try to do this, right? If you could compromise the .com servers, you would have done something almost as significant as breaching the root servers. But there's all of these relationships are validated with something called DNSSEC, which is a very complex certificate system for relationships. So the root servers have a trust relationship to the top level domains, and then there's a secure relationship to the second level domains. And so they're validated, and hopefully they're going to help us for the foreseeable future. Just a, cool thing. This is Windows. And so you might never have looked at this, but this is a Windows 11 screenshot. And we might have put in 1.1.1.1, okay? But you could, in fact, change to encrypted DNS. By the way, I don't think that's the right IP. I think we need .2 or .3 for DNS over HTTPS. That's Cloudflare. Google's 8.8.8.8. Cloudflare is 1.1.1.1. But yeah, you can actually do this. Okay, so it'd be the fun sort of thing to do in your home environment on the weekend. If you wanted to, you could learn more if you want. This is the kind of cool stuff. If you like to geek out, you can come back and go to these URLs. Cloudflare's got amazing articles on DNS. Okay, so I put this out there because not to do it over like this week, but your job role might start having you manipulate DNS. And I'll tell you what, I've been through that and it's tricky. Okay, so that transition of not knowing DNS to knowing DNS to having to be good with it. This is a great resource for you. And then a really cool article that is cool to read on how an ISP's DNS servers got hacked. Okay, really cool stuff.